You're looking now at our piece of African art, our first piece of African art, which is the city called the Great Zimbabwe. And the Great Zimbabwe was built in the 11th century. So you're thinking like the 1000s. Think about the same time as the Romanesque era in the European time era. And Great Zimbabwe was abandoned then around the 15th century. So we're thinking like 1400s. And it was built by the Shona people. And it was an area full of homes and administrative center with a royal palace. It had sacred sites as well. And probably at its height, around 20,000 people lived in this area. So we're going to take a look at it. And again, I chose the background of golden, like a golden color, for a particular reason, which we're going to get into right now. So you're looking at a slide with some materials and cows, of course. And we're going to talk a little bit about their economy. So the Shona people basically got there or lived a lifestyle basically of mining and trade and also raising livestock. So first of all, with the gold on the left-hand side here, we think they mined gold at a site about 25 miles away from their city, and then traded that and transferred it to other parts of Africa and other parts of the world. And then also on the site, some of the artifacts we find are iron tools. So they call this age in Africa like the Iron Age because of the iron tools that we do find. The cattle are here. The cute little cows are over here because their economy really depended on raising livestock. And we think one of the reasons maybe that they abandoned the site in the 1400s is because of a drought and or disease, potentially with the livestock. So they needed to move in order to then rebuild their society. And then in the upper right, you have some pottery fragments. And one of the cool things about the Great Zimbabwe as a city and their economy was that they were a big trading site or center. And at the base of the hill and where they built their city, you had a trade route. And so you find so many different artifacts from all over the world, like porcelain from China, beads that you can only get from Southeast Asia, copper from other parts of Africa. And so you find all of those varied and diverse artifacts here at Great Zimbabwe. So it's a major trading center. It's a place that is rich in metals like gold and iron. They're raising livestock. They just have a lot of different kinds of wealth and economic kind of drivers to their lifestyle. And so that's really what this slide is about. So now Great Zimbabwe has three different sections to its basic like city structure. So at the top, the hilltop, built in around the 1100s, is the Hill Ruins, or sometimes called the Hill Ruin Complex. And it was probably out of the three different parts the most sacred site at Great Zimbabwe. They had a cave there that was their religious center, a sacred cave. Also in the Hill Ruin Complex, you had the ruler's residence, his family's residence, which was surrounded by about 30-foot tall walls. You had cylindrical towers. And what's kind of interesting about their architecture, and this picture is going to show that, and one of the things that I think College Board really wants you to know, is that their granite walls and granite structures, this stone structure, did not have mortar. And remember, mortar is that kind of sticky, kind of almost like glue that keeps the stones together. They did not have that. And there were a lot of openings in the walls that you see, these 30-foot, 36-foot tall walls that surround parts of their city. And with these really cool geometric patterns that you see here up at the top. And what must be kind of the thing you get from having these openings and having no mortar to solidify the wall, so they most likely were not, these walls weren't for defense. So, they were something else, perhaps merely decorative, not really sure. But these walls are around the hill ruins complex. Again, this would be, if you imagine a hill at the very top part of the Great Zimbabwe city. And then you have another section in just a sec. Well, here it is, called the Great Enclosure, which was built in this walled structure that you have is about 32 some foot tall walls. You have a big outer surrounding wall. You can see that here. And then you have a secondary wall that parallels along with most, or at least part of, that outer wall. And at the kind of edge, the end of those two walls, in the hallway that it presents, that you would walk through like this, my little red dot there, coming to this cylindrical piece here, that's actually called the Conical Tower, which College Board definitely wants you to know. Now, the Conical Tower, think of it like a granary, either symbolic or actually functional, where it would hold grain. And the ruler would be responsible for distributing that grain. So it's a definite symbol of power for the ruler. He is in charge of the food supply to his people. Some even think that this conical shape is like a phallus symbol, and also, again, would symbolize his power. So he's definitely in control of the food source, and that's at the kind of end of these two parallel walls with this narrow hallway that comes through. And then in the Great Enclosure, this is where a lot of people would live. Some buildings for religious rituals that were made out of clay and thatched roofs, like more like fibrous material. And so you'd have people living there in the center of the city. And again, it's called the Great Enclosure. And there you can see a little bit of what it looks like today. And then at the very end, like the foot of the hill where Great Zimbabwe lies, is the last section called the Valley Ruins. Now, I don't really have a great picture of it other than to see it along here. And that was the commercial area for the people who lived at Great Zimbabwe. It was for trade. It was to interact with people from China and Southeast Asia and whomever was coming to find goods and services. And it was nearer to a river there at the edge or the end of the hill. So, Great Zimbabwe, again, three sections: hill ruins, the Great Enclosure, which was the middle section, and the Valley Ruins, which was at the bottom of the hill, which was more their commercial and trade center for their economy. And again, after the drought, potentially a drought or some kind of disease, or maybe even they were having political kind of conflict with surrounding tribal groups, they abandoned this site in the 15th century. But at their time, in their heyday, it was a thriving city that was built on an economy of cattle and trade. And at the beginning picture, you see these really interesting bird sculptures. I just put those there because Great Zimbabwe is known to have these soap stone bird sculptures that were protective or symbolic of good omens you would find throughout the city. So I just thought they were kind of cool to see for you, but they're not specific to College Board. So again, this is Great Zimbabwe, African art piece, city built by the Shona peoples in the 11th century to about the 15th century when they abandoned that. Full of homes, sacred sites where religious rituals would go on, a palace or a home and dwelling that was separate for the ruler, and various symbols around for the power of the ruler, and an area for economic function as well. So hope that helped you with Great Zimbabwe. Stay tuned for other pieces in Africa coming up soon.